My name is Miyuki Baker, and I use she and they pronouns. I would say first and foremost that I'm a visual artist, and I work in different mediums as well. I've made a lot of zines about health and gender and sexuality and race and a lot of other things. Um, and I get paid to be a PhD student. So that's the way that I make a living. And so I'm a third year in the program of performance studies at UC Berkeley, and I'm researching spaces of hope and race in Oakland. I used to tell people that I lived to eat. um, so that gives you a sense of how primary a role food has in my life. And I would still consider myself a foodie in that I spend a lot of time thinking about food and different aspects of it, including the ways in which it connects me to my ancestral roots, but also in terms of, you know, what you eat is what you are kind of mentality has been drilled into me, for better or for worse, which I'll probably get into later in this talk, in this conversation. But I would say that a lot of what comes up for me when someone asks me about my relationship with food is my mom, because she's someone that was really determined from when I was born to make sure that there were 3 meals that were home cooked, and that we'd eat together. And this isn't a value judgment on anyone who doesn't have that or didn't have that, but it was just part of my upbringing, and really informs the way that I relate to food and how important it is to me, because I could feel my mom's love in every dish that she made. And I'll just say a little bit about her, is that she is an immigrant from Japan, and she came over in her late 20s after marrying my dad, who is European American. And she grew up being the cook of the house. And so she had to prepare for her entire family. And it was her mission when she brought me into the world to make sure that I knew how to enjoy Japanese food. And so there was just always this consciousness about balance and variety and a built-in sense of Japanese-ness in all of the food. And even if she cooked different kinds of cuisines, the comfort food, the stuff that we would go back to, was always Japanese. But I'll say that food has been a consistent theme throughout all of my different moments of struggling and of questioning things about myself, in terms of health and spirituality and of community. And yeah, it's constantly teaching me new things to consider.
How do you create healing rituals with food in your life? It sounds like your mother really helped for a lot of rituals growing up. How are you continuing that?
You know, I think that calling it ritual makes it sound possibly planned out, but you know, the way that I'm interpreting it is like anything that you do frequently and with love. And I think that, you know, my one thing that just pops up for me is that in my house of 3, we all have different schedules, and it just so happens that I usually get the morning hours to myself in the kitchen. And I really love preparing food in the early hours when things are still dark or when it's starting to get light. And there's something about being alone in the kitchen and yeah, cutting vegetables or warming things up to nourish me first thing, like before facing the world, that really grounds me in a way that cooking at dinner time doesn't. I'm one of those people that would rather just warm up leftovers for dinner. But like breakfast time, I have so much more energy to prep meals and um, yeah. And then I would say that when I'm feeling sad and blue, I find myself grabbing the Japanese ingredients and I make a really, really traditional Japanese breakfast or lunch or dinner, which might include fermented soybeans, natto, which is like really slimy. I think you said you had had it before. I love all things that have a slimy texture in food, like okra and like yamaimo, which is a type of yam or potato. Um, I love seaweed, you know, make some miso soup. I'll make a big bowl of rice and have some pickled plum and put some anchovies in and like eat mackerel and just really go the full way. And also something really important, I think, to this ritual is using vessels that have significance or some kind of association with food of a certain kind. So growing up, I was surrounded by like maybe typical Japanese vessels, but I was also surrounded by pots and plates that my mom made because she, for a while, was really into ceramics. And so I have some of those pieces now at my house. And just getting to arrange all of the food onto these like significant plates and vessels. And then I love making a food arrangement and like taking a picture, and I usually upload it onto Instagram. Part of it, that's all part of the ritual, is like making something beautiful, and it's like creating an offering for my body, which is also woven pieces of my ancestors and descendants that are to come, you know. So I think that like my art practice centers beauty. And so it definitely informs the way that I make food arrangements and bring that into eating.
How do you see and feel and experience the practices that you just mentioned, nourishing your own self-care and holding space for others to do the same?
I would say that they are these downbeats of my life. You know, it's like if I don't have enough of them in the week, I feel less grounded. Um, and there are specific foods that I can eat when I'm feeling ungrounded, like literally root vegetables. You know, I can have kabocha squash, I can have sweet potatoes, I can have lotus root, I can have all these different gobo, burdock root, these hearty vegetables that root me down. Now, in practice, like going and getting those vegetables when I'm really feeling blue, like that's another story. You know, that's part of the challenge of us not, or I should say, just talk for myself, of not planting these root vegetables in my backyard because we have to go and get them at the grocery store or the farmer's market. But I would say that because in my house we share our food now, as of maybe 4 months ago or something, 3 months, that feels like a really easy connecting point of how I help others nourish themselves. It's, you know, it can be tricky when you're living with such different schedules. But I love it when we decide, for instance, oh, like now we're gonna collectivize our bone broth making, so that we always make sure that we have some frozen bone broth for when we're sick, and like we just have it, so we'll always be able to make soup for each other. And last night my housemate made me some soup because I said I was really hungry coming home, and that kind of thing. You know, it's just like, how can we extend just one bowl of soup at a time, like our love and our care for each other. And yes, there are distances between us that make that a little harder to access, but when it's possible, it's a really beautiful way of showing self-care, for myself and for others. And I think that when I bring a packed lunch, um, for school, you know, that kind of thing can also turn into practices of self-care. Like me and my, um, colleague, we had this setup where we're not on the same schedule anymore, but like when we were, we would rotate. Like one week we would cook for the other person, and then the next week they would cook for both of us. And that kind of thing, like I just really believe in the power of food to connect people.
Why and how is cultivating a mindful relationship with food an essential aspect of a person's or community's spiritual and political practice?
Hmm. Well, that's actually a really loaded question if I look at the maybe tumultuous year that I had last year with my relationship with food.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, maybe as like a activation warning, for folks who have eating disorders, or I don't know if there's a better word for disorder. Do you have any thoughts?
I'm thinking, I mean, the first thing that came to mind is eating challenges, but that can sound euphemistic. I don't know. I think that, yeah, I don't, eating disorder, I feel like is such a medical
Yeah,
label that's limiting, really limits the the societal responsibility that of why these certain disturbances or challenges or patterns,
mm,
um, painful patterns with our relationship with food, how they land in the body as a consequence of, um, really the disorders of our society,
yeah,
and
exactly.
and the kind of challenges that our ancestors have faced and we carry in our body in
Right.
present time.
Yeah, and I think that there could also be an entire paradigm shift, um, in which the way we even name that, like, so yes, we have traumas in our bodies, like that's one way of looking at it. There's so many ways of looking at it. And I think that, most recently, because of like daily observation of sensations happening in my body, or because I started a program, with Elizabeth, who does queer body love coaching, and this question about how we soften into things and have loving compassion towards all the things that end up surfacing in our lives, like that has deeply altered the way that I view my body and my relationship to food. Because yeah, as soon as we start naming things or pathologizing things, um, yeah, it takes away from the love that we could be having for our bodies at just the way they are. Um,
Mm.
but with all that disclaimer and contextualizing, I guess I'll just try to give a brief, map of where 2017 took me, which was that, I had this feeling that I was overeating when I was
Mm.
stressed out. And it took me to a place where I thought, when I saw on my Instagram, a an ad from a queer gym to sign up for a 6-week fitness challenge, it took me to that point where I thought, yeah, this is what I'm going to do in order to stop the overeating.
Mm.
Um, and so I did it, and I tried to hide it from my like public
Mm.
persona, because
Mm.
I had judgments of participating in it as well.
Mm.
Um, and it was a really fascinating experiment of eating way more protein than I've ever eaten, and of having to track the, body fat percentage that I had.
Oh, wow.
Um, in order to, because
Yeah.
it was there, the way that a lot of these challenges work, well, I don't know if that's true, but this one was like, it's free if you lose this much body fat. And
Wow.
so in this capitalistic society that is very um, incentivized by saving money, I am definitely part of that. And I was like, well, I don't want to end up having to pay this amount. I'm
Right. A
gonna
lot of
lose
people
those,
don't have the
yeah, percentages. And so I
right.
did it and I lost it and I did it all. Um, and, I actually gained a lot of muscle, and it was very interesting and cool in some ways of getting to see how I could, have a really strong core and like have stronger upper body, but all the other facets of it, which is trying to do something for 6 weeks and then it's like a really extreme thing to do, and them telling me, well, you can continue this, and my body being like, no, you can't, not sustainable. So that very quickly just rebounded, and I was um, overeating again. And then I think the next thing I came to, someone had introduced me to it. It was Overeaters Anonymous. And I was new to this whole paradigm of these 12-step programs. I'd heard of it tangentially, but it was the first time going to one of these. And there's still a weekly meeting that happens for people in Emeryville or nearby. And so I went to that, and it was fascinating. We had to kind of say some things together, and I was like, okay, this is it. Like, I'm gonna do this every week. And like, I need to find a patron, which is what they call the person that's your mentor, who like checks in on you. And they are of the mindset that you have trigger foods or activation foods that you just completely need to cut out. And that every day you check in with your patron and you just leave it out. And you make sure, with support of your community, that you cannot ever have this thing again, because it'll stimulate overeating.
Wow.
Which at the time, because I still hadn't started Soften with Elizabeth and hadn't gone to, anyways, I was just like, okay, I guess this is what I have to do. Like, am I really willing to cut out sugar? Am I really willing to cut out these other things? So I say those things in order to hopefully demonstrate that given all the things the beautiful things that maybe I grew up with in terms of food with my mom and all that, like that didn't prevent me from like accepting social oppression around food and the way that we consume it. And so, okay, so like returning to your question of mindfulness with eating, I think that mindfulness is created on a foundation of kindness. It's, equanimity is another way to talk about it, or like objectivity. But even those two things, I think, need to be planted in a soil of kindness. And so no matter what activity we decide to bring mindfulness to, I believe that it's about having kindness towards ourselves and others. And so, okay, now if we apply that lens to food, what does that look like? It means that if I do end up having a lot more food than what maybe my body feels comfortable with, it means I don't berate myself. It means that I'm mindful that I've just done this, and that's that. That's the past. The past can never be changed. Okay, I'm here in the present moment. What can I do now to make myself feel better? Oh,
Hmm.
well, maybe I'll have a cup of ginger tea. Oh, well, maybe I'll have some bitters. Or maybe, you know, maybe I'll lie down. Maybe, like, there are all these different approaches that can happen. And maybe it means not doing anything and just literally being and just breathing and noticing and observing and realizing, okay, like, I'm feeling really nauseous. That means I have certain sensations in my throat area, my chest area. I'm also feeling like I might have to go to the bathroom. Okay, now what am I feeling? And not having judgment about it and just like enveloping myself in that kindness. And so yeah, and then how do we bring that mindfulness of food to other people? It's the same thing. Like if someone is telling you they're doing something around food, you know, it's like not our place to tell them what to do or what not to do. It's like, okay, like, you know, if they need support, hopefully they'll feel comfortable. Like we can create as much kindness and mindfulness as we can possibly manage, and hopefully that will invite them to ask for support if they really need it. But like, yeah, I'm of the mindset now that it's not our place to be like, well, have you tried this, or like, you know. And I think, yeah, folks from the disability justice lens know that too. While my mom gave me all this nourishment, she also had a lot of judgments about my body when I was in my adolescence, and would often say that I, you know, was gaining back fat, or that I had to eat 80% full because otherwise, you know, I would gain weight. And I have specific moments of kind of, yeah, sad interactions around food. And so I think actually what I was trying to do is create a, even though they definitely talk to each other and weave into each other these awarenesses, I think I was trying to say that all the kind of spiritual and like ancestral and even like practical wisdoms that I gained from my mom around food, like that didn't prevent me from, or that didn't help me create like a sense of understanding my own self-worth no matter what my body size was.
I wondered if you wanted to reflect a little bit more around how you find expression for beauty, and unite people around food and cooking.
Let's see. I think I'll just start by saying that we all have bodies. We all need to eat to live. And so when we gather together, why not eat together? And it's one of those things that demonstrates the wholeness of our bodies. You know, it demonstrates sustaining this most basic thing. Yeah, so I in all of the gatherings that I've been a part of in the past, well, I guess I've, yeah, for 29 years been a part of different kinds of gatherings, whether as active organizer or not. But there have been so many different formations around food. And one of them that is very repetitive in our culture is going out to eat with a bunch of people. And inevitably, what happens in that scenario, I think, is unless you're in a spot that is just like really, really, really affordable, like people feel like they can't eat what they want to eat. So I think that like a lot of the liberatory spaces I've been a part of have just eliminated that by saying like, let's potluck and let's just bring what we have. And so that feels like a really awesome way to go. And like I also see certain limitations with that, like if people don't have access to a kitchen or can't cook, or you know they feel like they can't bring something, they feel the pressure, maybe they don't know how to cook, you know, all these things can also emerge. But you know, with that said, I do think that it's really nice to gather and bring a lot of different kinds of dishes together. And I think that I have my staple dishes that I always make sure to have, including the sticky brown rice that you like, and
That's so good.
Have some kind of bean curry or something, that isn't stressful for me to make, but is
Mm.
hearty and filling in that way. When people bring lighter things, it can, be balanced and stuff like that. One is if you're really pressed for buying, like if you feel that it's a burden to buy healthy organic foods and produce, come on Sundays to Fruta Gift, which happens at 2060 36th Ave in Fruitvale, where we regift produce donated by farmers at the Temescal Farmers Market. 3 to 4:30. So that's like a logistical suggestion. And then I think I would also say, I actually made this article on how to settle more quickly in a new place. And there are some maybe insights for that, and I can like send you the link for that. But it's basically a question of like, what are the staple foods that you eat a lot of, or that you would eat a lot of if you had it, and just knowing how much you'll eat in a given day. And like mindfulness for me, again, it like goes back to just love and kindness. And so that means having enough food that you feel excited about ready, and easy to access. And so, and I know that a lot of people feel rushed and like pressed for time. So one thing that will alleviate that is simply, soaking things before you go to bed. And in the morning, all you do is press on and it's ready. You like rice is one that I do that with, or beans. And I mean, I would recommend, if you don't have a cooking practice already, it might be nice to invite someone that you admire the cooking of, and offer to be the sous chef, just so that you can gather some tools. But other than that, I think going to the farmer's market or the grocery store, and or your backyard, if you are so lucky to have your own garden, and just really tapping into what's calling out to you, and like just listen to that intuition. It may start out with just a whisper, but I'll go and I'll be like, I need to have kabocha. Oh my God, I need to get it like right now. And then other times they'll be like, I don't know what I want. But like, in like looking around, something will inevitably be like, ooh, make me into something, like eat me. And I'll get it. And then like when I make that after I've listened to it, like it's really cool. And I also understand that sometimes we have what we have, and we have to just make what we can with what's available. And if you make it into a game, like one of my favorite things to do as an artist is taking discarded objects or things that people thought were like ugly, and then combining it or remixing it into something that's really pretty, and enjoyable and with value. And so I do the same with food. Like when people are like tired of a leftover because they've had it 2 days in a row or 3 days in a row, it's like, okay, how can we remix this? How can we turn this into something else? How can we like mix these 3 leftovers and combine it into something fabulous? So just being creative. Well, I have one central blog with all the links, and it's heymiyuki.wordpress.com. You can also follow me on Instagram at heymiyuki. And if you want to read my zines, go to queerscribe.com. But if you go to my main WordPress site, all the links to the other things will be there.